Hey guys, hi, my name is Balasubramanian Valapadi Bhaskar. So I'm a master student in the Department of Civil Engineering. I'm here to present my project 1 for ARCH 653 course, Building Information Modeling. The topic I've selected for this is the Aspire Tower in Doha. The structure had a tapered design. The diameter varied throughout the height of the structure. The structure hosted around 36 floors, which had various features like 5-star hotel and a revolving restaurant, observation decks, etc. So the first step was to create the central concrete core around which the different features in the structure were hosted. So this Revit file generally takes you through the process of creation of the central concrete core. Once the concrete core was modeled, the next step was to again create the different circles as shown in this Revit file to host the different components. The heights between each of these circles is directly proportional to the number of floors it hosts. For example, the bottom two circle hosts like around 22 floors of the total structure, which includes like a large reception area and a 5-star hotel with a swimming pool attached to the top. The whole structure was made to be parametrically modified with the help of two key parameters, which happen to be the height of the core and the bottom radius as shown here. So the height of the core was the distance to which the core extends up to the top surface, and the bottom radius happens to be the radius of the bottom circle. So each of the subsequent form elements were fixed based on these two parameters along different heights using some of the formulas shown here. This was followed by the creation of the form elements as shown here. The present shape also holds the torch, which is the main component of the Aspire Tower. There's a small extension that extends from the central core, which eventually helps to hold the torch. So this file shows the completed first component of the model. So this structure is made to vary parametrically, as you can see if I try to control the key parameters. You can see that the structure elongates well, and the parametric relation is carried out all throughout the structure. This even applies to the bottom radius. So once I apply the bottom radius values, you can see that the whole structure also flexes well. So the next step in my model was to create the lattice shell structure that encompassed the torch. So in order to achieve the lattice shell structure, I had basically designed a hollow cylinder, and I used an ellipse form to cut the cylinder from the elevation view that gave me a resultant structure that looked like this. So my final model was created when I tried to join the lattice shell structure to the main model, and it gave me a resultant model that looks something like this. The parametric relation was carried well in this model too. So when I tried to change the key parameter, it kind of reflected well in the structure, with the whole structure elongating. So the next step was to create the facade pattern. So I had a choice to make it this step where I could actually use two different curtain panel designs for the first component up to the height of the core, or I could use one single one in which I could have used a circular design that actually run through the diagonal elements. But I chose to use two different components because my final rendering images was really representative to that of the actual structure design. So my first curtain panel design is a simple rectangle element, and my second panel design is looks something like this, where I tried to vary the circular diameter to be much larger than the other one, because eventually I had to get that effect in the structure, and it showed off really well. So when I tried to place these two curtain panel designs into the structure, my final model looks something like this. You could see the horizontal lines work really well. The next step was to create the curtain panel design for the lattice shell structure that encompassed the torch. So the interior surfaces had a different pattern, and the exterior surfaces were made to be given a different pattern. So the curtain pattern for the exterior surfaces as shown in this file, and the interior surfaces were given the shape of a rhomboid that actually made it look very similar to the actual structure. So when I placed these two components into the design, my final shape looks something like this, with the rhomboid shapes on the interior and the rectangular shapes at the exterior. The lattice shell structure was then placed on the first component to complete the whole structure design. It is the structure design is as shown. Then I followed it up with the massing of the whole structure. I added floors, roofs at different levels, and I recreated all the 36 floors in the model. I also added some topo surface elements. I used my own user-defined material. It's actually called my grass. And I was also able to place some environmental elements, and I was able to give the structure a building path to which kind of showed the structural foundation. These are some of the perspective views of the model that I created to show the use of furniture spaces. So this one possibly represents a waiting area for a restaurant. You could see like the interior rendering for this, and this was also followed up with the interior rendering for the hotel room. So I just managed to place a number of components and decided to show the usage of spaces in this. So now you can see the rendering images for both the hotel room as well as the revolving restaurant. The interior rendering images have been made to associate with different timings during the day. So this represents the hotel room during evening time, very close to sunset. And the next rendering image shows us the hotel room during night time. And this rendering image shows us the restaurant waiting area close to sunset, and this one represents the restaurant waiting area close to night time, and this one represents the restaurant waiting area during daytime. Exterior rendering images are now as shown. So this represents the exterior rendering for the structure with exterior sun only, and this one represents the elevation of the whole structure with the same conditions. This is another rendered image, and this finally concludes my presentation for the project 1 in Architecture 653. Thank you for your time. Cheers.